Welcome in, Big Blue Nation, to another episode of the Cats Talk podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Johnston, joined by co-host today, Jacob Boyers. Jacob, this is supposed to be the time of the offseason where you and I can both relax, and here we are, getting a football podcast in what is not good news. Vince, the big dog, Marrow, I don't know if we're going to call him the big dog, might call him some big other things from now on, decides to go to Louisville to be the general manager of their football program. Give me some of your initial thoughts when you saw Pete Thamel's tweet.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Cam. It's June. We're supposed to be, chilling, not really talking about football, especially, maybe have an episode where we talk about Kentucky's basketball roster being finalized. But here we are, kind of getting hijacked with Vince going to Louisville. I look at it in kind of two parts. Kind of the smaller picture of, Vince, the coach, leaving, and we've talked off air. I totally could see Vince leaving. The writing was on the wall. He's entertained a lot of jobs, including Louisville earlier the year. The fact it's Louisville, he's no longer the big dog to me. He's no longer the guy that me and you're going to seek out at Keeneland and go up and get pictures with. He's tarnished his Kentucky reputation, and it's a shame. He's not just player coach. He's one of my top three favorite guys to ever be involved with the UK football program. Him, Lynn Bowden, and Randall Cobb for me. So to kind of see him leave, it sucks, and especially to see him leave to Louisville. The bigger picture, I think it just speaks to the state of the football program in general. And I know we're really going to kind of dive into it, but it just seems like everything is an absolute disaster over there. They have been dead quiet since the offseason, haven't said a word, and you're kind of maybe seeing why. It's just very dysfunctional over there right now.
Yeah, man, I genuinely think they're making it worse by not saying a word.
Absolutely.
I think they've done maybe, a couple news conferences, a couple radio shows where they have to just get into just to show a presence. I mean, even like I told you, I went to the spring game, quote unquote, and it was abysmal. There was no one there. It was a spring practice. There was no energy there. There was nothing. Like, it seemed like everybody who was there was paid to be there. It was just like employees. Everybody's clocking in and clocking out. There was no energy and excitement. And if you go to other spring games around the country, Ohio State's only 2.5 hours from Lexington, maybe 3. Look at how they do it. They sell it out. 100,000 people are there. It's a big event. Kentucky, I mean, it's just been dying and dying. Starts at the helm with Mark Stoops. It's obviously trickled down to the big dog, and you see that with why he wanted to leave. I'm just confused as to why right now. Why in the middle of June is it that he decides he wants to leave to the in-state rival? I know he's friends with Brom. I get that, and that might be a big decision and why he wanted to leave. But why didn't he do this in January when he was entertaining those thoughts then?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely to me shows, something switched from January to now. Me and you, we're a fan podcast. We're not tapped into members of the staff or players and, getting to behind the scenes, but kind of everything you hear is just, you know, it his and Stoops' relationship has really kind of, you know, grown apart over the last, few years, and then maybe even sped up to growing apart over the last 6 months. And, you say, why didn't it happen in January? Honestly, maybe it was a good thing that it happens in June, and these guys that, committed when and the portals open and you lose more and more. But, there's obviously some very major problems going on that, Vince wasn't happy with. KSR obviously reported him being asked not to recruit Ohio, him, pretty much being told to take a step back to Eddie Gran. I don't know how you look at the best recruiter this school's ever seen, a guy that's gotten players that we would never have dreamed of being here, and you sit there and tell him, we're going to ask you to kind of take a step back in recruiting. I mean, you're not paying him $1.3 million to be your tight end coach.
No, and if you are, we've got no production out of the tight ends. We better go find a better tight
Very
end.
true.
But, I mean, speaking on that, Vince has built to where the state of Ohio is, obviously Ohio State gets who they want, but Kentucky's right there for second.
Yep.
Maybe Michigan can reach into some of the back pockets of Ohio, but Kentucky's right up there when it comes to getting those guys from the state of Ohio. And Vince is the reason for that. You mentioned, Lynn Bowden earlier, big prime example of that. One of the bigger recruits this team's ever gotten. He was the biggest recruiter in that cycle for him. I don't get how you take somebody who has deep roots, who has consistently gotten great talent in the state of Ohio. Don't get me wrong, we can go get more talent in other states, but when we're talking about just Ohio and just what Vince does in that state, if the rumors are true that he was asked not to recruit Ohio, it genuinely makes no sense. I get asking him, hey, maybe let's try and get him out. Maybe we talked about Texas or California, Georgia, places where we typically haven't recruited all that well. Georgia, maybe a little bit. But I mean, Ohio is what would you say, fifth, sixth best state when it comes to producing high school talent, and to pull him from there just makes no sense.
Well, and it's also like it's what made you successful, right? Like
Mhm.
everything Stoops and Marrow were really the first ones to come here and be like, why are we going to go try to recruit down south, kids in Florida and, Alabama and all these places where, there's these major college powerhouses that already have established roots in there. You know, we can go get every player that Ohio State doesn't take out of Ohio. And that's what they did. And that's how you won, 8 games, 10 games. And you had that level of success where, Mark Stoops was able to become the all-time winningest coach here, and it was all formed from that philosophy of we're going north. We're pretty much telling everybody in Ohio, hey, if you're not good enough to play, at Ohio State, or Ohio State isn't reaching out to you, you can come be in the SEC. We were the only school doing that. So it's just like, you got something that was working and, would probably continue to work. It's, as all these other college changes are happening, it's not like the players in Ohio are getting worse. So, you know, that was your pipeline, and you tell your, best recruiter not to go recruit there. I text you right away when we saw that report, and I said it's just inexcusable, and that's how I feel about it.
And it genuinely just, I can't even think of the process behind it. Like, I get wanting him maybe in bigger states where you haven't gotten those true successful wins. But this staff turns over quicker than, you
Yep.
and I just like clock in and clock out for work. I mean, how many times are we talking about in the off season? There's no continuity with the staff. There's really only two guys that have stayed on the staff for a long period of time, and those are Eddie Grant and Vince Marrow. And I don't know about
Well, and
you.
Eddie left too. I mean, you fired Eddie and then brought him back in this, new role.
Yeah. I mean, and Vince, I don't know why Vince wouldn't have the power to recruit who he wants to recruit. We can talk about developing those players once they get on campus, but as just recruits, he's doing what he can in the state of Ohio, and that's where we've been getting most of our recruits. I mean, outside of the 2025 class, majority of our top recruits in 2024 and so on, like Brian Robinson, who was 96 nationally in 2024, like that was a big get out of Westerville, Ohio, and Vince was the one who was doing that. Again, I really just can't wrap my head around it. I get wanting him to go to other states, but Kentucky and Ohio, like that's where he's made his bread and butter. We need more Vince Marrows, not losing the one that we had.
Yeah, and just back to the point of if you're not asking him to do what he's best at, like why are we paying him $1.3 million? Like you're paying him that because of the recruiting success. So all in all, like again, I come back to it. I understand Vince's desire to leave. Now we got to get into the part of like he's going to Louisville, and it's
Do it.
it's F him, and again, he's no longer the big dog. Like he betrayed us, and if I ever see him, I'm throwing the L's down. Like he ain't
Right.
one of us anymore.
Yep.
But it's just it's a shame that the kind of animosity got to that point.
Yeah, and the UK U of L rivalry. I mean, it's starting to heat back up a little bit more because
Yep.
obviously their basketball program was so putrid for so long there for 4 or 5 years that now, I mean, we're competitive in every single sport that we play them. To lose your longest tenured coach to the rival, I mean, it hurts. Like you said, we see the big dog. He's not welcome at Keeneland. If he tries to get
No.
in the doors, I'm just not allowing it.
Yeah,
This
he can't
this
take.
rivalry is huge, man. I went to Las Vegas, saw a couple Kentucky fans while I was out there, saw a U of L fan. First thing I did, just straight to him. He saw it, L's down. I mean, the rivalry goes that far. I'm all the way out in
Yeah.
Nevada, repping the L's down. It'll stay like that, even with Vince there.
Yep. I mean, you know me, my hand will cramp from throwing the L's down
Yeah.
when it's time. I mean, I don't care if my wife goes and coaches for Louisville. Like it's the enemy at that point. I mean, we'd probably be talking to divorce lawyers at that point.
Would
It's
have to.
it's sickening. But yeah, all of it doesn't make sense. If you want, we can kind of get into the bigger picture of UK football and where this is going because I don't think it's going to be a good, fun conversation. I had to make me a bourbon before we recorded.
Yeah, I do. Let's just talk about this year, and then we'll get into the bigger picture, obviously, of things. I mean, when Vince decided to leave, Kentucky had two recruits
Yeah.
in the whole cycle, which we were the only Power Four school that had that little of actual commitments at the time. Now, granted, commitments in this day of age with people switching left and right without having to sign anything doesn't necessarily mean as much because they can get flipped just like that. But two at this time, obviously, I mean, Vince probably wasn't out doing his hardest work. And, I can't imagine that he was. If he was entertaining this in January, taking the job in June, I can't imagine you got a full 100% locked in Vince during this recruiting cycle. And I think it kind of shows, even though Kentucky has been able to get two recruits this week.
Yeah, and I mean, again, neither one of us are kind of behind the scenes, so like that's very real possibility. Vince wasn't, giving in his all and wasn't going out there and trying, and he was, pretty set on the fact he was going to try to find another job to jump ship. Or it could have been that, in January when he said he was going to stay, he actually decided he was going to stay, and he went to, in Mark Stoops' words, grab his lunch pail and go to work. And Stoops said, actually, no, we don't want you doing that right now. So, like, I mean, that's part of it too. Like, you take your best recruiter out of Ohio, maybe you're sitting here mid June with two recruits at the time, before he leaves.
Yeah, and just talking about basketball for a second, we always talk about putting people in the best positions to succeed.
Yeah,
Obviously, we don't want Ansley Almanor handling the ball at the top of the key. You put him in the corner, he's splashing it down, and he's super effective.
yeah,
Obviously, don't take Vince out of where Vince's corner three is Ohio.
yeah,
Get him out there. He's got a chance with some of the bigger schools. Obviously, he pulled guys like Deion Walker from going to Michigan, Maxwell Hairston from going up to Michigan as well. Even that Michigan pipeline, he's really performed really
yeah.
well. Kentucky, Ohio, and Michigan is where he's thrived. And to pull him out of Ohio, which specifically comes out with the best recruits out of that state of those three, doesn't make any sense. Especially, I mean, Eddie Grand, to go to Eddie Grand, I mean, that's just got to, I don't, he's got to be mad about that. Eddie gets fired, then gets hired on as like hey, I'm Mark Stoops' buddy kind of hire. And to lose out ground to Eddie Grand, I can't imagine that felt great to Vince.
Yeah, and I will defend Eddie like slightly. Like, all the reports are, he's done a lot for UK football over the past couple of years, more so behind the scenes. He's kind of the number one, fundraiser kind of guy and really has had the, untitled role of GM. So, I don't think it's a bad thing to have Eddie Grant around this program, but if you're telling Eddie Grant you want him to specialize on trying to find talent in Ohio and Michigan over Vince Marrow, who has, again, owned those states. And I mean, like, those are Vince's people. Vince walks into a family's living room in Ohio and, like, they're bought in instantly. He knows how to talk to them. And to take it and then just hand it over to somebody else and tell Vince you want him to essentially take a step back, it's mind boggling.
I mean, he's got relationships at a lot of these high schools.
Absolutely.
Obviously, just keep producing talent, keep producing talent. He goes back year after year, and you can show him the success stories. Hey, man, we turned Lynn Bowden from a 4-star into a productive SEC player that got drafted in the third round. I mean, you have guys that you can just keep showing and showing and showing that you've built and developed. So why take him out of that area? I'm not sure. Yes, Eddie Rand supposedly does do a lot of the fundraising. Obviously, that's not something that we really have access to be able to see any of that. But my thing is that we need more guys like Vince. If you look
Yep.
at you want Kentucky football to take the next step past, that 2022 where we had, 9 wins. If you want to take a step past that, you have to have like 5 Vince Marrows. Like look at Brian Hartline at Ohio State. Obviously, that's like the cream of the crop there, but they have 5 guys that are like that. And they let their guys recruit who they want to recruit and where they're
Yep.
at. Brian Hartline's great at getting receivers in. Look at Jeremiah Smith as a freshman doing stuff like that. We need to put guys in position where they thrive. Find guys that can either recruit a special position or have connections like Vince did in Ohio. We've got to figure out a way to do one of the two because right now what we're doing just doesn't seem to be meshing.
Well, and it's only getting harder, right? So like now's the time that like you should want a Vince Marrow to really kind of be leaning into these kids' ears and saying like, "Hey, you may make a little less here, but we're going to put you in the best position to succeed." Like I understand that's a very hard recruiting, strategy, right? And like that makes Vince's job a lot harder, and maybe he can go somewhere where football is kind of like the sole focus and have that unlimited budget, but if there's anybody that can do it, it's Vince. So, like at that point, I would think you would want to keep him as happy as possible, to keep him as locked in as possible, and have him go to work. Because I mean, with this house settlement, like it's pretty obvious Kentucky's not going to spend in football what every other SEC school spends. Like we're going to invest in basketball in a way that the rest of the SEC won't. And like you can say we should, we shouldn't, whatever. I mean, it's just reality. How much more we're going to invest, I don't know. But like, you would just think you would want the best recruiters and the best people at that, job trying to do it. And if that happened and Vince in 2 years said, "Hey, I can't do it anymore. I'm going to North Carolina. I'm going to Michigan, wherever. I can't be recruiting at a $2 million deficit every year." We would understand and shake his hand. But this just to kind of force him out almost is what it felt like. Seems absurd.
Yeah, and that's why I really want to hear from Vince and from Mark, hear both of the sides and see, what actually happened. Obviously, you're going to get two sides of the story, but from the outside looking in, it does feel like they have done a lot to keep Vince because it feels like, especially over the last 3 years, every year there was a team, there was a suitor that he's potentially talking about going to. In January, it was North Carolina. Then he shot that down. Then it was Louisville. Obviously, he ends up taking the Louisville job now. But I do feel like they did do a lot, just like financially speaking, and taking care of him around the city of Lexington because he was beloved. And unfortunately, he probably still is, even though we should throw eggs and rocks at his car whenever we see him driving down to Louisville. But I want to run this by you as a question. Do you think he went to Louisville because it goes to the ACC? It's an easier chance to win. Like you said, the house settlement, where obviously we're probably going to give more money to basketball than most SEC schools would. We're already fighting an uphill battle in the SEC, trying to knock off those power programs. Do you think he's going to Louisville simply just because it's going to be an easier path?
No, I think there's multiple parts to it. One, let me say, like, I probably worded that wrong by saying we forced him out. Obviously, we made him the highest paid tight end, one of the highest paid tight end coaches in the country. Paid him as much as almost any assistant out there, let alone position. So forced out probably wasn't the best wording on my part, but when you, I guess, handicap him or limit him is more so what I was looking for. Um, as far as your question, I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think whatever happened in the last couple of years between him and Stoops, and Stoops and Eddie Gran, that led to tension between Vince and Stoops. I think it just kind of all plays into a factor. And then you look at it, he's really good friends with Jeff Brom. I think that's kind of the number one indicator. Like Brom has tried to get him there day one. As good of buddies as him and Stoops were, him and Brom are very similar in that relationship status. And then you have that aspect. You have, it's June. Like how many teams are, looking for a GM at this point of of their off season? It's probably not a ton. And, maybe something really bad, a big fight happened from January to June, and, Vince reached out to Brom or Brom reached out to him, and he just decided, you know what, it's time. I don't even care about being a position coach anymore. I'm going to go there, focus on recruiting, and just do what I'm best at.
Yeah, and obviously that's what he does best at. I couldn't tell you the last tight end that went over like 600 yards receiving, so I think he has definitely better as a recruiter. But I mean, just speaking for guys, we talked about a little bit off air that were just in, last year's recruiting cycle that were primarily recruited by Vince and the cycle before. Obviously, we see a lot more transfers now than previous years. But I'm at the point where I think this might just be a whole fire sale at the end of the year. I don't
Yeah,
think Vince's departure will change the on-field production for the season because at this point, guys can't leave. You're locked in for the year. I don't think it'll change wins and losses this year, but I do think this has a very, very big trickle-down effect for the years following, unless we can find someone who, I mean, obviously Kentucky, Mark Stoops, Eddie Grant, whoever it is that's making that call, thinks someone else can recruit Ohio better than Vince can, if that's what they were thinking. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
yeah.
It seems like that was the state we recruited the best outside
Yeah.
of the state of Kentucky, and even the state of Kentucky. We've started to lose our grip on that, as you can tell with how many in-state guys Louisville's got. I think they have 6 of the top 10 right now in the state of Kentucky, and there for the longest for 5 years or so, we were grabbing all those guys.
Yeah. Um, I agree with you that it's going to be a fire sale at the end of the year. I almost agree, you know, on a different level. Like if the year goes as poorly as I think it's going to go, and I fear it's going to go, like I I see Stoops leaving at the end of the year, whether he's fired, I don't know, but I see him just being like, I'm not coming back to go win, 3, 4 games again. Vince is gone. It's just time to walk away. But I think the roster, the coaching staff, everything we have right now, it's not going to look anything like it in 26.
No, I can't see a world where the coaching staff looks the same,
Yeah,
where the roster looks the same. I mean, we had so many guys transfer out this year and brought in a big portal class as well. I expect it to be even bigger next year with all the high school guys leaving. I mean, just looking at some of the guys that we had come in, like Mikel Skinner, our biggest commit that we had, tight end. Vince was the primary recruiter in him. I saw on his Instagram he put like 4 broken heart emojis with the news of
yeah,
Vince going out there. I mean, these guys, whether you like Vince as a coach and thinks he does develop the guys like he should, I mean, these guys love Vince. I
love
mean,
him.
anybody does, really. You go to Lexington, I think you'll have a hard time finding somebody who before Monday didn't like Vince Marrow. Obviously, now you'll find a good amount of them. But I mean, the guy was beloved in Lexington. I think after this season, you're going to see the real effects of what Vince did for this program.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and ask you what what's the world where Mark Stoops has success for this year and let's say a couple years beyond? Like what does it look like? Not saying it's likely, but like what's the path you lay out to where you say they can go win, let's just say 6 games this year and then build on that going forward.
We'll see. The thing is that like I was genuinely talking myself into, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I was genuinely talking myself into what I thought was going to be a successful season for this team. What had just happened. I'm talking about successful as a five
Yeah.
and seven season.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was talking myself into that. Maybe surprise a couple teams, go 6-6. I thought 6-6 was a ceiling for this team. I actually think this team will be better than last year, but the gauntlet of the schedule that they were going up against, it leads no mercy to them at all. I I don't know. I mean, Vince is as close to the program as it gets. He's obviously in there every day, and if he's willing to leave this team in June, I don't think that speaks to what he thought this team was going to be. Because I guarantee you that Louisville job would have been there for him next year in
Yeah.
January. You mentioned the tight relationship he has with Jeff Brom. He would have found a spot for Vince at any time. So I think Vince is trying to save his tail a little bit here and not go back to back 4-8, maybe even a worse season this year. But to get to your question, like I said, I think success this year is 5-7, and to most fans, obviously they're not going to look at that as success. I mean, I won't either, but I don't see where Mark Stoops. I think best case scenario for him, he has 2 more years left at Kentucky.
Well, let me rephrase it. Like what do they have to do this year to have a successful season? Like what do you think the recipe is, if any, for them to find a way to 5, 5, 6 wins?
I think Zach Calzada just has to be. I mean, 7th-year guy come in here, has played a lot of football. Auburn, Texas A&M, Incarnate Word. Hopefully, obviously this is going to be pushing the envelope a little bit. We did see Incarnate Word, Cam Ward go to Miami. I don't want
Future
to
number one
gas him.
pick, Zach Calzada.
He might be like 29 years old by the time he's going in there, maybe a little Brandon Whedon situation. But he's got to be terrific. He's got to be able to find guys like Kendrick Law. I mean, those guys have got to overperform. And the offensive line that you paid so much money for that got Eric Wolford an extension, which I know you don't want to talk about, Jacob, because that was just
We're going to get it. I had that on the list of things we need to talk
how
about.
you get them an extension at this point in the offseason after the year we just had. I mean, for crying out loud, we had Brock Vandagriff retire from football.
You had O-linemen buying hot dogs at halftime of games.
I was at that game.
And you gave that guy $100,000 more.
It doesn't make any sense. You gave him $100,000 more and an extension, another year on that contract. But that unit has to be great. I really think this offense has got to drain the clock. I think the defense you'll see a little bit less mistakes, but you won't have that top-end talent like you did last year with Deion and Max Hairston. That's where you've got to win games like the old Mark Stoops teams did with Benny Snell and then Josh Allen coming off the corner. You've got to milk clocks, and then you've got to just play strategic football. Back to the old Mark Stoops way of not taking too many chances, not putting the ball in harm's way, run the football, play good defense, win games the ugly way, 17-14, 24-20. That's the only way they have success this year, I think. And even then, I think that success might be 5-7.
It's so funny because we haven't talked about this off air, but like you took the words right out of my mouth. Like this whole style we begged, and Tom Tyler, nice to see you just hopping in here randomly at 27 minutes. But no, like I agree completely. We got to have Stoops almost go back to the style of play that we begged him to switch from. And with that style, like, yeah, you're probably not gonna, go compete for an SEC championship. But let's just be real, like these teams never are. Like your hope is when you play kind of that stall ball, you run the football. The offensive line's got to be better than what it was last year. I don't know if it will. I mean, again, you had your quarterback retire last year because he got hit so many times. You had offensive linemen buying hot dogs mid-game. So I'm not saying it's going to be better, but it's going to have to be if there's a, path for success. And, with this new SEC and, the rev sharing and everything that's kind of pinned against Kentucky football, like, if Mark Stoops could stay here another 3 to 5 years and, average 7 wins a year, I'm not going to be upset about that. But, you're not going to be able to kind of – I mean, we got to have a real conversation here, Cam.
But my thing is with that is if we're doing that, because most people just look at this as a 1-year slide. This is a 3-year slide, in my opinion. I think the 2 years prior to this should have been a lot better as well. And I think those were both bad years, and this one. I think this is a 3-year slide that's going to go on to 4. At that point, I get what you're saying, but I can't.
Yeah, this team, I think they're going to win 3 games, but I'm just saying, in the new way of college football and, we want Kentucky to invest more in basketball, I don't ever see this program becoming anything more than a 6 to 7 win, average program. I really don't. And, we could say it's loser talk, this and that. Like, we're not Louisville playing in the ACC where we're going to go play at Wake Forest and, get these cupcake wins. Now, should we beat Vandy on a consistent basis? Yes. Should we, compete and be very level with South Carolina? Yes. That's where we got to get back to. But, at the end of the day, I just think, the ceiling for this team going forward is going to be, an average of 7 wins. You might have 1 year here or there where you get to 8 or 9 and, pull some big upsets. But I just don't think this program is on a trajectory to, compete with the big boys in the SEC. I just don't.
I mean, I completely agree with you. That's why I said I think Vince was ready to go. I think this was one of the bigger things and the reasons why he's leaving to go to Louisville. Like you mentioned, it's a lot easier to compete in the ACC. We just saw SMU get into the college football playoff. I mean, how many SEC teams would have just rolled SMU last year? I think that's why he's gone. I think that's a big reason. Obviously, there was other factors. We mentioned the recruiting already and stuff like that. But I hear you. I really do. And you make valid points. And I agree with most of your points. I just can't. I can't go back to Joker Phillips
No.
days or the first 3 years of Mark Stoops. I can't. I can't go back to those. This is a SEC football program in which we are still going to put a lot of money into, even more money than a good amount of ACC schools will. We should still be performing at a high level, but high level just might have to change from the ceiling being those 10-win seasons down to maybe 8. And you're just going to have to get a coaching staff that can find guys that are those diamonds in the roughs, get those 3 stars and turn them into NFL Pro Bowlers like Josh Allen. You just got to find a staff who's able to do that. And those guys are
they're hard to find, and now it's going to be even harder to keep them. You get a Josh Allen, you get him here, he's really good. But that senior year, he may be looking at Georgia or Alabama and saying, "I'm going to go make $1 million plus," and be considered for all the National Defensive Player of the Year awards. So, yeah, I mean that obviously makes it tougher. And I think we agree on every point. Again, I don't think this staff's going to have success this year, and I expect a major change at the end of the year. But if Stoops was somehow to come out and win 6 games this year and then 7 for the next 2, I think that is as successful as any coach that you replace him with would have. Best case.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I just want to collectively think here. What do you guys think, if I had to ask you each your question, how long is Mark Stoops the head coach at the University of Kentucky?
I'll let Tyler go first. I think I've kind of said it.
Yeah, I think for me it's the opposite of what the fans are probably going to want to hear. But I think Stoops has as long as he wants to be there. I kind of look at it the same situation with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. I think he's done just enough to keep himself relevant. Obviously, Tomlin a little different. He has a Super Bowl, but he can kind of stay as long as he wants. They're not going to fire him. It's a traditional program. I think with Stoops here at the Kentucky with the Wildcats, it just seems like he's locked into a contract. Kentucky can't buy him out, and trying to find someone that can replace him at a lower rate is going to be impossible. So I think Stoops is there to stay as long as he wants, and he'll either have to decide to retire or step away himself.
All right. Well, thanks for dancing around.
I'll give you an answer here, Ken. I think it's this year. I think. Kind of to Tom's point, there's, a really good chance at the end of the year, Stoops just looks at himself in the mirror and says, do I want to keep doing this? I mean, if you listen to him in any press conference anymore, it's not the same guy you heard 4 or 5, even, 3 years ago. His whole demeanor's changed. So I think personally he's just going to want to step away. But let me make a counterpoint to Tom. If this team goes and wins 3 games next year, he will be fired if he doesn't step away. They got the money to buy him out. And everybody talks about, how good of a relationship he has with the donors. Those people had a better relationship with Vince. And now Vince isn't there. And the money's there. They were going to find the money to buy out Calipari at $57 million. They, before him and Barnhart did the hand-in-hand press conference sitting there, the donors told him, we got the money, we'll make it happen. So the money will be there for Stoops if it gets bad enough, and I think there's a real world it does. But I also just think there's an extremely good chance, regardless of what happens this year, Stoops just says, I'm done.
All right, Tyler, would you like to give me a season total on how long you think Mark Stoops is going to be at the head tenure?
For the season, you mean is he going to last a whole year or not? Oh, the number. My bad.
No, he's obviously here for the whole year. How many seasons do you think he's going to be at the University of Kentucky?
Well, how many more years does he have on his contract?
A lot.
A lot?
I don't know. Yeah. 5 or 6, 7.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him 5.
Oh, my God. Can DraftKings put that up, please?
Yeah, I'm taking the under. There's no chance. This guy's been hinting at retirement for almost 2 years now, and that was even when the team was going well and they were looking good. I'm with Jacob here. I was like, I think, honestly, if you were Vegas, you'd probably put the line at 1.5 seasons. Is probably where the line would be at. I'd take the under. Especially, if this team is bad, even if they don't fire him, I don't think he's going to want to come back to this because he's going to have a whole new staff. He's going to have to restart and he's restarting, like we mentioned, without Vince. At least this cycle, he had Vince to help him with, and everybody would be fired. Even if he was the one to stay, I don't think he survives it through that. I think for him to come back, he has to get, I think, minimum 6 wins, and that's
Yep.
where you can start talking about Mark Stoops.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine he goes and wins 4 or 5 games, right? And it's in a situation where you're not really ready to fire him yet, but just think about what like leading up to next year would be. Like, you think this year the fan base is like making this relationship toxic? It'll be at a whole nother level if we do another year of 4-win football and then getting told we got to motivate Mark Stoops coming back and this and that. Like it'll be bad. Like if he wants to continue to do this here, he's going to have to go out. And I agree with you, Cam. Find a way to 6 wins, and I mean that's extremely tough looking at this schedule coming up. But who knows? Maybe, like I said, maybe they'll get back to old Mark Stoops football, and he'll find a way to pull a couple upsets and bleed the clock in some games that they shouldn't win.
I think they have to. That's the only recipe I think that they have. Unless you have like a hidden gem in Bush Hamden who just needed a year to develop, and now he's just a master scheme guy. He's got all those badges in the college football dynasty mode. He's just got all of them, and he's just unlocking. He's unlocking all these things. I don't know, man. I want to be positive about this team. I really started talking myself into being positive about this team. And then you get news that a guy who is the longest tenured guy outside of Mark Stoops is leaving to go to the rival. It's hard to be positive when you're getting news like that. So I'm not going to feed you guys any lines you don't want to hear because it's not sunshine and rain.
No, I agree. I've been extremely negative, obviously, before the Vince news, and then that just tells me there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that we're not even aware of. Again, they haven't made a peep all offseason other than giving Eric Woodford a $100,000 raise. Like, just think about years past. Like, even when the team wasn't like very good, we were still hearing from these guys, and Vince was going on radio and saying like, we got some dogs, we got some bad. He did it to us at Keeneland. We went up to him and you said, Vince, tell me about the team, and all we heard was, we got some bad, and he went to cuss and he stopped himself and said, we just got some bad boys. That's all I'm going to say. Like, there was none of that, and there was none of that out of Stoops too. And Stoops would like get on there and be like, we're really talented, but I don't like our effort at this point. We got to work harder, this and that. But it is dead quiet over there, and like now they're going to have to speak because of the Vince is forcing them to. But like it's just been dead quiet, and it's felt off and wrong all off season, and now you're kind of seeing maybe why.
Yeah, Tyler, you've seen some of these after the offseason, just the negative from the fan base, how almost toxic it's become. I've been telling Jacob here for 3 years I've been unsatisfied with the results of Kentucky football. That Will Levis senior season coming back, only winning 7 games, doing the exact same thing the next year. I feel like I had been the negative one for 3 years, and now I have to be the one that's positive for this team. So, Tyler, just looking at the offseason in a whole, and now with this Vince news over top, as a fan, just like, what are you thinking going in the offseason? Try and paint a positive picture for me on the 2025.
Look, here's the positives, right? So we've just hit we've hit the ultimate reset button this offseason. We've gotten a lot of new faces. We've gotten a lot of a bad culture in a lot of places. So, there's opportunity there to grow. Anytime you bring in a lot of new people, a lot of new faces, you can really rebuild it from scratch. And this team has nowhere really to go but up. So, we'll see what comes out of here this season. There are a lot of positives to look at. It's just looking really dim. You see schools like North Carolina who get Bill Belichick, and there's a lot of hype around that. Whether you like the move or not, there's just a lot of hype around that. You see the Buckeyes who just came off the national championship. Of course, they're getting hype right now. You see other teams are just normally in the news, which is fine, but we're kind of an underdog right now, and no one's looking at us as a championship caliber team. If we go out there and we win 5, 6, 7 games, that's a positive for us. So that gets us started, and maybe that's momentum going into years 2, 3, and 4 for Mark Stoops.
I can't imagine.
I had to throw that in there because I know you guys are thinking that I'm crazy, but I think that's a possibility.
I can't imagine it. I will say, trying to paint a positive light on this, if there's ever been a time in college football to rebuild overnight over a season, it's now with a transfer portal. We did have a very good transfer portal. This offensive line, I mean, we have all SEC guys, all conference guys coming. We have guys who have proven themselves. A good amount of them have to step up in competition. Obviously, Alex Wolschlager from Bowling Green, he's going to have to step up in competition. Jaias Pete from New Mexico, he's going to have to step up in competition as well. That's the best picture I can paint for you guys, is that the transfer portal looked good. Hopefully, guys from the 2024 recruiting class that we're going to get into just a little bit, guys like Brian Robinson, the Smith twins, Ryan Nichols, who we saw good stuff from last year. Same thing with Cam Dooley. You just have to start getting production from those guys. They have to have developed, because not a lot of those guys have left. A lot of those guys have stayed. You have to see the development.
Yeah, well, you guys gave the slight positive. I'm going to take it back to the, real world.
Oh, I'm trying to end on a positive.
I mean,
leave it to boys.
You
Just
won
screw it up.
one home SEC football game in the last 2 years. You have lost to Vandy 3 out of the last 4 seasons. Vanderbilt, the team that was consistently the doormat of the SEC that everybody stepped on. Even when we were going and winning 2-3 games, we were beating Vandy. Tyler mentioned, culture and how it's a whole new team and this and that. But you know what? You still got the head guy there that oversaw it all.
Yeah.
You still got the offensive line guy, coach that had players, again, going and buying hot dogs and having zero discipline. And, you hear all the reports of these guys not coming to practice or showing up late to practice. Those guys are still in the building, And maybe it's just Stoops' culture doesn't work in this era where you have so many guys coming in for 1 year, via transfer. Maybe he needs to get his claws into them for 3 years and really build it where you have those, Cash Daniels and, Landon Youngs and all those guys that could really, sell what this coaching staff was about. But again, you just hear how Stoops talks in press conferences and everything from top down, like everybody's demeanor changed. We talked about it after the season, Cam. Like, how much did Stoops just bitch and moan after, all throughout the season? It was all year about everything. That wasn't the guy that was hired, 13 years ago or whatever. So that all circles back to, I just think the writing's on the wall for this to be another poor year and, Mark to hang it up at the end of the year. But I don't see optimism here. I think, again, the culture shot. It feels like the coaches, essentially checked out, and something major happened to lose the guy that was kind of your ride or die for the last 13 years.
Let me be clear. I'm not optimistic about the season at all. I was just trying to paint the light here, but I think you brought up something really, really good there. Really good point. This just isn't the era for Mark Stoops' brand of football. There's not many people that want to stick around a program to play that ground and pound, rush the ball 30, 40 times a game, and play consistent defense to win games. I mean, that was the reason we were losing some recruits early in the Stoops tenure. I think the game has passed him by. He might still be a hell of a motivator, a great defensive mind. I just think his time as a head coach should have come to an end. I don't think he's prepared for this era. I mean, you've seen it. The transfer portal last year, I mean, like you mentioned, Gerald Mincey out buying hot dogs at halftime. Guys not showing up. He can't get 3 years out of guys consistently. I just think it's time for Mark Stoops to hang it up, and that's why I predicted this is going to be the last year for him. I think he realizes that as well. And you mentioned the amount of complaining and bitching that he does in press conferences. Anytime he does actually do any media, It's almost like Cal there, where he was just avoiding the media for the entire time. And when he was there, he was just complaining and saying, "Oh, I need more money. I need more funds. I need this." Hey, listen, man, this is the SEC. We're giving you still a good amount of money. How about you take some of that $11 million salary and spread it across those 4 wins and give us some extra money back? Like, I don't understand the amount of complaining that he's done.
We need a rebate option on that head coaching salary.
The similarities between Stoops and Cal are staggering. I mean, they're very different personality guys, but if you just look at the last, few years of Cal and what we're getting with these, what I believe will be the last few years of Stoops, like, it's identical. You mentioned the press conference, going after the media, not wanting to talk to media, hiring your buddies on the staff, whether they kind of deserve to be there or not because you like Bruiser Flynn or you like Eric Woodford, you got that, Eddie Grand becomes his right-hand man and you push out maybe, the best assistant in that program. I mean, there's so many, similarities, and you can kind of see the paths are going the exact same direction. And, again, I think Stoops hangs it up at the end of this year. Who knows? Maybe even goes and tries to, coach somewhere else after this, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't see him going anywhere else. I think he's either sticking around and trying to, fix the program that he built with quotes, or he's just hanging it up. He's got his own little bourbon business that he's probably put more time into than the football program that he has. But I want to hear from you guys. We'll end on this. Best and worst case scenario record for the 2025 Kentucky football team. Tyler, I'll start with you. Give me your best and worst case scenario for this team.
It's tough. It's going to be a wide margin, I think. I think the best case scenario you're looking at, I mean, you could steal some wins. I don't think it's going to happen. I think you could steal some wins and get to 6 or 7 wins. Worst case scenario, you're worse than last year. We're just not taking off. The players are not. The culture doesn't fit. It's the same culture we've had the last few years, and we've lost so much talent that we just can't keep up with anybody else, and we win 2 or 3 games. So I think that's the margin. I think it sucks to say, but we're either going to be one of the worst, or we're going to be maybe just above the middle of the pack.
I think the best case for this team, unfortunately, is 6 wins, and that's everything goes perfect. Zach Calzada is really good. Every game he plays like he played against Alabama that one time.
8 years ago, however long ago it was.
Perfect. And again, if they find a way to win 6 games, I will give Mark Stoops a lot of credit, because I think with this schedule, that's an accomplishment for everything that you've seen. Worst case, I'm going to say 2 games, and I'm not going to say that's as great. If you ask me today to take my money and bet what's more likely, 2 wins or 6 wins, I'm probably taking the 2 wins because there's only 2 teams on this schedule you're guaranteed to beat, and that's Eastern Michigan and Tennessee Tech. You opened as what, a 9.5 point favorite, or Toledo was one of the best teams in the MAC last year. Kentucky was one of the worst in the SEC. Those teams usually, there's not a very big gap right there between the worst SEC and best MAC school. It's not as big of a gap as people would think. So, I hope we're not. I hope we're not getting together, Cam, for that first UK football game and watching us, lose to Toledo. But it's definitely on the table.
In fairness to that point, we beat the brakes off of Ohio University, my alma mater, last year, and Ohio University won the MAC last year. So, there is it could very well go the opposite way too. We could shellac them too, but
yeah, I was actually gonna bring up what Tyler said. Last year we did not play well outside of the Ole Miss game, and even then, you can just say Ole Miss really just beat themselves. And we were still, what did we beat Ohio by?
I think it was 40-6, right?
It was a stupid score.
Yeah,
basketball numbers.
It was a blowout. It's what you expect when you see an SEC team versus a MAC. For that reason, I hear Toledo does produce, NFL talent. You think of Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Alexander, who just left in this year's NFL draft. Even worst case scenario, I get the 9.5 point spread. I don't see Kentucky winning 2 games, only 2 games. I think they have to get 3: Toledo, Eastern Michigan, and Tennessee Tech. And Jacob, I think I'm right there with you. I do think 6 wins is probably the ceiling for this team, because even just getting to that 6 wins, you're talking about taking care of the 3 of those teams, and then you're talking about beating Louisville at Louisville, Vandy at Vandy, who's returning Diego Pavia for his 46th season of college football. A little Chaz Lanier, a little Zakai Ziegler in there for these guys. I know Boyers just want to take a shot at Zakai Ziegler while we got a chance here. But, I mean, you're talking about winning both of those games and then stealing an SEC game against Auburn. Florida's probably your best chance. I don't think we have a chance against South Carolina. Lenora Sellers returns. He's going to be pretty good. He's already, climbing up draft boards. And then you face Georgia. I mean, Georgia's still Georgia. They didn't play well in the college football playoff. That one we don't have a shot at. Arch Manning and Texas come to town. I don't think we stand a shot there either. Versus Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee's got some question marks, but we're not beating Tennessee. Tennessee's got our number in football. I think we all can acknowledge that. Auburn, we had them at our place last year. Auburn was not good last year, and they still beat us.
Yeah.
I think Auburn will win that game. Yeah, now we go there. Florida beat the brakes off of us last year, and now they're returning.
Lagway is only going to be better.
Yeah. And the freshman that they had that scored 5 touchdowns on the ground against us, he's back as well. I'm more talking myself into the best possible situation for us is 5 wins, and that's
think about that. Like, just to have a chance to get to 6 wins, you got to beat Vandy, who you again have lost 3 of the last 4 against, and to your point, they they didn't like kill you scoreboard wise, but you were never really felt like in that game. And then you got to beat Louisville, who did destroy you on the scoreboard last year. And again, and that's like to win those 2 to get to 5 wins. Like you gotta. Yeah. Kentucky's going to be an underdog in 9 of their 12 games this year. So just to get the 4 wins, you're going to have to pull an upset somewhere, probably. Who knows? Maybe there's some injuries and stuff happens, and you're favored against Vandy towards the end of the year. But for the vast majority of the schedule, you're going to be an underdog. To win 5 games, you're going to have to pull 1 or 2 upsets. Like it's not a pretty picture being painted.
Yeah, if I had to put the Vegas line at a half win, over under SEC wins this year.
SEC?
For the Cats.
Yeah.
SEC wins.
I would probably bet the over. I mean, I feel like you probably find a way to go get 1. I mean, nobody obviously thought you'd beat Ole Miss, but to your point, they kind of beat themselves. But I mean, it's college football. Weird stuff happens. Some guy might go out and throw 3 picks, and you return 2 of them for a touchdown, and you win a game you're not supposed to. But God, it sounds crazy to like be contemplating whether they're going to win 1 SEC game or not.
That's why I didn't want to give you the easy answer at 1.5.
Give me till August, and I'll come back and make my prediction on if we win a SEC game or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk myself into getting some positives here. Just the type of guy I am. I'll get positive before August rolls around, at least as much as I can with this football team. But I don't know if you guys got anything else you want to sign off on, any positives you want to spin, because after listening to this episode, no free ads here, but 988 suicide hotline. Just in case you need it.
I mean, I wouldn't do anything like that. I think after when's the first game? August 30. What?
It is
August 30.
August 30.
After that Toledo game, I know I'm going to put in my phone and everything. I'm just going to wake up to a countdown of basketball season. Give me to that Louisville game during basketball season.
Seems like that's what everybody's already waiting for, as some of the new guys came into town over the weekend. But guys, if you have nothing else, Tyler, go ahead and sign us off.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in for yet another episode of the Cats Talk Pod. I'm your host, Tyler. These are your other hosts, Jacob and Cameron Johnston. We look forward to having you guys all season long for the season, hopefully in a very positive light. I know Cam is dying to be positive about this team. He's been dying to be positive for so long. Same with Boyers here. So, let's have a good season this year. Let's have a really good turnout, and tune in for more content like this. Go Cats.
Down, Vince.
Okay.